Well, good morning, everyone. May I have your attention, please? We'd love to welcome you now to the 30th Annual Prayer Breakfast for Greater St. Louis. I'm Dan Gray from KTVI Fox 2. I'll be serving as your Master of Ceremonies this morning. We're so pleased that you are all here. You know, when I found out who was going to be our featured speaker this year, it reminded me of a somewhat serious and comical incident that occurred in my life when my son Nick was 6 years old. One day he had been eating a piece of hard candy. He had walked out of my sight and he returned, and he had a troubled, stressed look on his face and wide-eyed look. And I knew he was in trouble, and I said, I sensed he was choking on the candy. He couldn't speak, so I ran to him. I got my arms around him, wrapped him around his chest. I did 2 compressions. The candy popped out. His eyes were watering. He was afraid. He was stunned, but he started breathing normally again. And later that day, he came to me and he said, "Hey, Dad, can you teach me how to do that high Nick remover?" And I said, "Well, sure." He kind of put his own name into the procedure, and I guess he thought that if it happened to anybody, it would be the high Bob remover or the high Mary remover. I promise to get the name right when I introduce you this morning, Phil. In just a moment, Phil Heimlich will explain his family connection to the world-famous life-saving technique known as the Heimlich maneuver. Phil Heimlich was born in suburban New York. His family moved to Cincinnati when he was a young boy. He graduated from Stanford University, earned a law degree from the University of Virginia Law School. He went on to serve as assistant Hamilton County prosecutor in the Cincinnati area. He was elected 3 times to the Cincinnati City Council. In 2002, he was elected by more than 60% of the vote to the Hamilton County Board of Commissioners. He is now running for re-election as a county commissioner. He's been active in CBMC, and in 2003, Phil began traveling the country speaking about the importance of his Christian faith and how it plays out in his life and his career. He has spoken at prayer breakfasts throughout the country. We are very happy and pleased and honored to have him with us this morning. He and his wife, Rebecca, have 2 children, a 2.5-year-old boy, Henry, and a 6-month-old girl, Natalie. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Phil Heimlich.
Love that story, huh? As Dan mentioned, I'm a politician from Cincinnati. I don't normally speak to people who can't vote for me, but you seem like a nice crowd. This is an exciting time in my life. As Dan mentioned, we had our second child 6 months ago. Hey, I'm 53 years old. I just had a kid. I don't get a round of applause for that? Gee whiz. I'm able to have a child at this age. My wife is quite a bit younger. She's 17 years younger than I am, but she's been terrific about that whole issue. Oh, we got some good. All right, great. There's always somebody in the crowd tries to top me on that age difference. She's been very understanding about the age thing. In fact, when we got married 5.5 years ago, some people said to her, are you a little concerned about the age difference? She said, that doesn't bother me at all. Phil is so immature, we're very evenly matched. I remember our first anniversary. We were sitting on the beach in Bermuda, and I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this same week my parents were celebrating their 50th anniversary, and it was wonderful. I turned to Rebecca and I said, just think, hon, in 50 years we'll be celebrating our golden anniversary. And she turned to me and she said, in 50 years you'll be dead. I'll give her credit though. Rebecca has never pushed me about having kids. So all she said, I just want to have them early enough so as long as you can go to their high school graduation without using a walker, I'm fine. So no big deal. When Stan Bauer and the rest of the host committee asked me to come and speak today, they said to me, we don't want you to talk about politics or elections, that kind of campaigning. We just want you to talk about yourself. I told Rebecca that. She said, oh, that won't be a problem for you. It's your favorite subject. I do not understand where my wife gets this idea that I crave attention. I do not get that. But when we got married 5 years ago, months before the wedding, I'd be introducing her to different people, and whenever I'd introduce her to somebody, she'd always say, "Hello, I'm Rebecca. I'm playing the role of the bride in Phil's wedding." I do come from a pretty successful family. Dan mentioned my dad. My dad is Dr. Henry Heimlich, the inventor of the Heimlich maneuver. Norman Vincent Peale once said that my father is responsible for saving more lives than any person alive today. Every time, like Dan said, every time people hear about that, they always make a big deal. But I always say, don't be impressed. They've done research on this, and they've found that genius skips generations. On my other side, my mom's side, her parents were Arthur and Catherine Murray. Anybody remember them? The dance studios and big TV show in the 50s and the 60s. And my other grandfather, my father's dad, was a pioneer in social work. He was so prominent in the field of helping juvenile delinquents and working with prisoners and things like that. He actually was invited to the White House by Eleanor Roosevelt, the wife of President Roosevelt, to be honored for his work in social work. So I'm proud of the things that my family has accomplished, but at the same time, I remember when I was growing up, this pressure. I felt this pressure that I had to succeed, I had to accomplish. I remember that. And as a kid, the way I met that need was I threw myself into sports because I recognized that when you're a kid, the way to achieve popularity and status is through sports. And so whether it was football or hockey or whatever, I just threw myself in. Now, I had one problem in sports. I was small, but I was slow. And in fact, I remember I was so determined to succeed that after 7th grade, I went to a football camp, a hockey camp, and a tennis camp all in one summer. I can remember in the 8th grade, looking ahead, just deciding that failure in my life was not an option. And I started planning my life. I decided I was going to go to a prestigious Eastern boarding school. That would get me into an Ivy League type college, and that would get me into a top 10 law school, and that would launch my career as a prosecutor and then in politics. In fact, at the age of 14, I could tell you everything that I was going to be doing, every step of the way for the next 30 years. Or to put it another way, I was one annoying kid. You've heard